So what is a quadratic? Let's back up. A quadratic would be in this form. And sometimes you might see it like with an equals 0 on the other side. These are both standard form of a quadratic. We've worked with them a ton in this class already, okay? Back when we were graphing them, we had to use like the negative b over 2a, and then we went to the chart in our phone. With factoring, we had to do these, and then we set our factors equal to 0. That's what we did the last few days. So when you have a problem like this and you have to solve it and get the two solutions, there's 5 different methods. Let me go through those 5 different methods. Today's the 3rd one. So we did graphing. If you remember, the solutions was you take your 2 factors, set them equal to 0, and solve. Guys, please stop talking. Okay. Take your factors, set them equal to 0, and you solve. We did factoring last couple days. You factor, set them equal to 0, and solve. This is the 3rd way that we're going to talk about, and this is called quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is like the one method that works 100% of the time. If it has an x squared in it, in other words, 2 is your degree or biggest exponent, the quadratic formula will always work. Not all problems are factorable. So I could give you a problem potentially and say factor it, and you could make a chart, and there's no 2 numbers that multiply to get this and add to get that. That could happen. I mean, I'm not going to trick you, but there are quadratics out there that can't be factored. There are no quadratics out there that can't be solved using the quadratic formula. This is a formula you will have to know, okay? And you've seen it before in Algebra 1, I'm sure. So let me bring it back, copy it down precisely. Notice there's A's and B's and C's in there. Those come from standard form. A is the number in front of your x squared, right? B is the number in front of the x to the 1st power, and C is the constant. That's the number with no letter. If any of those are missing, those values would be 0. So if I just had like 2x squared minus 5, I'd be missing the x term. That would mean B would be 0. So if any of them are missing, you would call it a 0. And that's going to happen, okay? You're going to have sometimes when either this one or this one are missing. And you just have to know, okay, what letter was it that would have been in front of that? It now is a 0, okay? So look, x equals negative b plus 4 minus, that's how we say that. That means you're going to get 2 solutions. Remember, we always get 2 solutions with quadratics. That gives us a positive and a negative, or a plus and a minus. Then a big radical, b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times a, okay? So let me show you how to, this is all calculator work, okay? If you just do the steps the way I'm going to show you, you'll have no problem with these, okay? Can I punch buttons in my calculator correctly, right? So let's look at our first example. Solve using the quadratic formula. And we're having a quiz on Friday on this. So we're going to do this today and tomorrow and have a quiz on Friday. Only on this. Just this. So A is 3. B is negative 16. And C is 16. So on the quiz, I am going to give you the formula, okay, for the quiz. When it comes time for our Chapter 3 test, the very first question is a little slip of paper. I'm going to walk around the room, hand them out. You're going to write the quadratic formula on it and turn it back in. That's going to be extra credit if you got it right, okay, on the test. And then I'll put this on the actual test. That way, if you don't bother to memorize it, you can still pass the test. You just won't get the extra credit, okay? But just know that you'll see these problems on SAT, ACT, and they don't give you the formula. So you do, the more you work with it, the more you learn it. But do you guys kind of remember it from Algebra 1? Like, does it ring up, like, kind of like a memory? Only what? The name. Okay. And it's okay if you don't remember it. I'm going to show you. All right, so first thing is we have to be able to identify the A, the B, and the C, okay? Notice the sign in front of a number stays with it, okay? So that 16 is a negative 16. That's important, right? So let's go ahead and plug into the formula. So I have x equals, right, negative b. So negative and then plug in a b. Moving forward, what could you have just made that right to begin with? positive, right? When you plug a negative in where there's already a negative, they cancel each other out. Like this in a minute is going to become positive 16. So you don't have to show that. I just didn't want to do that right off the bat. You could have just immediately made it 16, okay? Plus or minus, make yourself a nice big radical. B squared. Since B is negative, I'm going to put it in parentheses because I want to square all of B, not just the 16, but the negative and the 16, minus 4 times A times C. The whole thing over 2 times A. Okay? So we pull out the ABC, plug into the formula. Now you're going to use this order of operations, okay? We're going to go work on the radical first, what we see here. And I'm going to use the space right above the radical, so if you didn't leave space there, just remember to next time. I didn't leave myself much space, but I don't need a lot of space. And I'm going to just use that right above to simplify this. So negative 16 squared, don't forget, guys, when you put that in your calculator, if you don't put the parentheses, it's going to make your answer negative. And it's not negative, right? It's the whole thing in parentheses. Oops, I didn't mean to put that many numbers in there. Negative 16 squared side is positive 256, okay? So why bother with putting two sets of parentheses, a set of parentheses and a negative? Just know that when you square your B value, whether it's positive or negative, you're always going to get a positive answer. This number 100% of the time should be positive. So get that out of the way. Don't ever write a negative there. Can't happen, okay? Then look, watch my hand. And I'm dramatic for a reason. What's left, right? I already did this. All that's left is this. Negative 4. I know we say B squared minus 4, but when you look at it like that, isn't that just negative 4 times 3 times 16? That's built into the formula. Every single time you get to this step, you'll pick up your calculator and start with negative 4. If you do that, you will cut out 85% of the mistakes people make on these problems, okay? So I'm going to type in negative 4 times 3 times 16. And I get negative 192. So that's what I write up here. Negative minus whatever. If it had been a positive answer, I could get positive, what would I have written up here? Plus 192, okay? So I'll show you that again in another example. I'm going to do a bunch of the homework with you too, okay? Because I just want you guys to feel comfortable with this. If you hate factoring, you could always fall back on this because this works every time. But you do have to know how to factor, so I shouldn't really say that. Okay, so let's go down a level, I call it. Let's see what we have now. So the minus and the negative become 16, right? Underneath, wait, plus or minus, even though I wrote above it, this is really happening underneath, okay? So let's simplify 256 minus 192, and we get 64. Still under the radical, right? That is really underneath, and it's 64. Over what? 6, okay? Look how much smaller it just got. Now we're not done with the radical. We stay with the radical. Is there anything I can do to simplify that? 2a in the denominator. Oh, 2a, a was the 2 times 3, okay? All right, so here's the answer to the question. Yes, there's more we can do. Sometimes the answer is no. If that was like the square root of 2, we wouldn't be able to simplify it, okay? But since it's the square root of 64, I'm hoping you're starting to recognize what is the square root of 64? 8. Is the 8 under the radical anymore? No. When you get rid of the radical like we just did, we can go one step further and just simplify it. You're going to do, right in your calculator, 16 plus 8, enter, divided by 6. And then 16 minus 8, hit enter, divide by 6. So get your numerator first. So 16 plus 8 is 24, and 24 divided by 6 is 4, right? That took care of the plus. Do the same exact thing with the minus. 16 minus 8 is 8, divided by 6 is, oh, don't like that. Math, enter, enter. If that was a terminating decimal, like it was just 1.3 and it stopped, you could write the decimal answer, okay? But when you have to write a symbol or it keeps on going like a repeating decimal, you just hit math, enter, enter, okay? So I am kind of particular about that. There are our two solutions to the problem, 4 and 4/3. Sometimes you get two positive, sometimes two negative, some one and the other. Don't worry about signs. Whatever happens with the signs is what the answer is. Okay, let's do another one. Because this is the easiest right here. When this is a perfect square, you don't have a radical left, that makes us the happiest. Okay, what else could happen now? Let's look at another one. Just one more. Go through these steps with me. Don't fade away. Stay with me. You need to encounter lots of different situations with these problems to feel really comfortable with them. Anyone have an idea of what we need to do first before we do anything? Standard form. I love that you use that term. This 17 should be a 0. So we know how to make it a 0. We subtract 17 from 17, we get a 0. So if you subtract 17 from this side, you have to subtract 17 from this side. There's nowhere to subtract it from, right? There's no like term. So we'll just put it in his spot, which is that C value. And that was the first step with factoring too. Remember, we had to have everybody in standard form, which, like you guys just said, get it in this order. Okay, what's my A value? 1. Remember, that's a 1 in front of the x squared if you don't see a number. B would be positive 4, and C would be negative 17. Do you see how someone could make a mistake and just look at this number and think that's C? The whole problem is wrong because you forget the negative. Okay, so be really careful. Now we plug into the formula. X equals negative B plus or minus, big radical with space above it. Now, B is positive. You can put it in parentheses or not. It doesn't matter, okay? So it does not hurt to put it in parentheses, but it's not necessary because it's not negative. B squared minus 4 times A times C. All over, there's right here, right? 2 times A is 1, okay? Just want to make sure you got that. Anybody have a question about where any of those numbers came from? Look at the formula. This negative 4 right here, is that what you're talking about? Or this negative 4? This one right here? No, this one. That's part of the formula. It's every time in there. Okay, that's always there. That's part of the formula. Okay? Like the last one we did. We just did the last one we did, it had a negative there too. I already lost the problem. Oh, right here. Negative 4. Negative 4. It's always there. Okay? Now, let's simplify the radical. 4 squared. 4 times 4, that's 16. Remember? Watch, watch, watch. This is the mistake everybody makes. I'm telling you. Trust me. When I go to my calculator, this step, the first thing I type in my calculator 100% of the time is negative 4. Because like I was just saying to Paris, that's part of the problem. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 17. Positive 68, right? So what do I write up there? Plus 68. We had a negative answer in the last one. So we wrote minus. So if it's positive, it's addition. If it's negative, it's minus. Okay? Go down a level. And now let's put those numbers inside. 68 plus 16 is 84. And 2 times 1 is 2. Everybody good? Now, this is the hardest part. You guys hate these types of problems. I remember. Sometimes we get a radical. That's not just like the square root of 2 where we're done, or the square root of 64, which is a perfect square. Sometimes we have to simplify the radical, which is a skill we learned a while ago, and you guys were not fans of it. Remember, what we're looking for is 2 numbers that multiply to get 84, where one of them is a perfect square. So if you feel like you need to write out the list of perfect squares, but the more you work with them, I'm thinking you should know them, right? 1 times 1 and 2 times 2 and 3 times 3. So 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, those kind of numbers. So I'm going to start dividing 84 by different numbers. I heard someone say 4. Oh, it goes in evenly. Is that the biggest number that goes into 84 that's a perfect square? How do I know the answer is yes? Because 21 has no other factors that are perfect squares, right? 21 is 1 times 21 and 3 times 7. So that's a perfect choice. The square root of 4 is goes. And the 21 is stuck inside. Okay? So square root of 84 gets us that. So now I'm going to go back and put it in the problem. So I have negative 4 plus or minus 2 square roots of 21, right? I just changed the square root of 84 to 2 square roots of 21 over 2. And sometimes, like in this problem, there's one more thing you can do. Look at the numbers on the outside. Let me highlight them for you. The numbers that are not under a radical. Negative 4, 2, and 2. If those are all divisible by the same number, you can simplify it one more time. What number goes into negative 4, 2, and 2? 2. So if I divide u by 2, I get 1. If I divide by u by 2, I get 1. If I divide u by 2, I get negative 2. My final answer is negative 2 plus or minus. I can put a 1 in front. I wouldn't mark it wrong, but we don't need that 1 in front. 21. And you could put a 1 in the denominator, but we don't need to. That is your final answer. That is the same as saying negative 2 plus the square root of 21, negative 2 minus the square root of 21. That's written in radical form. Could I put it in my calculator and get an actual decimal? Yeah, but we want to leave it in radical form, the most simplified radical form. So you can see this step, coming back to haunt us, is something we have to know how to do for some of these problems. This part, yeah, I'm going to figure out what that section is again, so I can tell you if you guys want to go back and watch that video. Sarah, do you have a question? Yeah, I'm going to start the homework right now. Okay, so let's do some of the problems from the homework. Page 179. It was one of the pages you ripped out the other day. 179. And I'm going to do, there's only four problems. I'm going to do 2 of them with you and leave you to do the other 2. Okay? I had it up top. So number 1. Guys, I'm doing homework with you right now. Do it with me. Guys, as you're getting settled, look, just don't write this. I'm going to show you. I could have solved this by factoring. You would get the same answer. It's just 2 different methods. Numbers that multiply to get 15, add to get 8 would be 3 and 5, 3 plus 5. When I factor that, you don't have to write this. This is not a factoring assignment. And I bring plus 3 and plus 5 over, and I set them equal to 0. This would be my solution. And I'm going to show you when we do quadratic formula, we're going to get the same answer. Okay? Some problems, you have more than one method of solving them. Okay? Think about. Well, the directions will say solve by factoring or solve by quadratic formula, so you'll know. This is a solving by quadratic formula. I'm just trying to make a point to you that some problems you could solve more than one way. Okay? All right. So let's do quadratic formula here. A is 1, B is 8, C is 15. Right? Everybody was on the left-hand side. We have a 0 over here. We didn't have to move anybody around. Okay, so x equals negative b, okay, negative b, plus or minus, big radical, b's positive, so parentheses are optional, b squared minus 4. See how that number, that is always there, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. Whatever a is. It's not always 1. It could be anything. Yep. Then we focus on the radical. 8 squared, I'm going to write it right above, is 64. It's still inside. Just understand, I'm just using this as like a little place to work, okay? And then I'm going to type whatever's left, including the negative 4, in my calculator. So negative 4 times 1 times 15 gives me negative 60, right? I write that, negative or minus 60. If it's positive, I put a plus. Go down a level. 64 minus 60, which is really underneath the radical, right, is 4. And now we have to deal with the radical. We love it when we get something like that, right? We are all, I think, all really comfortable with the square root of 4. Right? The square root of 4 is just what? Just 2. No radical left, right? It's a perfect square. So we don't have to simplify the radical, like find factors or anything. We can put this in our calculator 2 separate times, one with a plus, one with a minus. Okay? So you have to type it in twice. So I have negative 8 plus 2, hit enter. That's my numerator. Then divide by 2. One of my solutions is negative 3. Didn't I tell you that? Negative 3 is one of my solutions. And then negative 8 minus 2. Enter, divided by 2. So if I had factored that one or used quadratic formula, I would have got the same answer. Okay? Question number 1 before I do number 2 with you. It's a preference thing. So Paris just asked which one's easier, and the truth is, I mean, it just depends. Some of you are like expert factorers already. This would have been really easy for you. Some of you hate factoring, which is normal, and you're like, I'd rather do all this mess. This takes more time, but a lot of people like this better. Here's the problem, though. Whether you like one or the other, you have to know both, okay? You do. There's going to be problems on the test that I'll say solve using this method, solve using this method. How could this help you? You could check your answer. It could help you find what your numbers are here. There's a lot of different things you could do with it. But you do have to know how to factor, guys. Factoring ain't going away. It ain't. All right, here's number 2. Let's see number 3. Okay, so A is 12. B is negative 22. And C is 6. Oops, I went off the paper. Okay, so let's plug into the formula. X equals, guys, look, when I plug in negative B, where there's already a negative, I can go right to skipping that step. I don't have to write a minus, parentheses, and negative. Ooh, we're going to get some big numbers on this one. That's okay. It's all done in your calculator. I didn't give myself I'm making the key as we go here. So I didn't leave myself a lot of room. All over 2 times A. So a couple common mistakes is messing up that first guy's sign. Okay, be careful there. And right here, we get in the habit of writing 2 times 1 every time, because a lot of times A is 1. That we forget that sometimes it can be something else. So just be careful. It's 2 times whatever your A value is. All right, we're going to get some really big numbers here. So 22 squared, or negative 22 squared, is 484. Okay, we got it. Then I type in my calculator, negative 4 times 12 times 6. And I get negative, so minus 288. Right? So 484 minus 288, I'm going to get 196 under the radical. Okay? Now, what I would do if I were you, this would be a really smart thing to do. If you get a really big number, see if it's a perfect square before you do anything else. Because remember, after, like, the ... when we make a list of perfect squares, it goes on forever, okay? We don't memorize all of them. I think you all know, like, 4 is a perfect square, 9, 25, things like that. But 196, I don't recognize it. Let me just check. So if I put the square root of 196 in my calculator, if I get a whole number, it's a perfect square. If I get a decimal, it's not. Oh, it's 14. That must mean that 14 times 14 is 196. Okay? So when you get a non-recognizable number, check to see, because you're going to save yourself a whole bunch of work instead of going off to the side and trying to simplify it. Okay? So the square root of 196 is 14. We love it when we get a perfect square there. No radical to deal with. Now we go to our calculator and we type in 22 plus 14, right? I'm doing the plus. Always hit enter before you divide. If you don't, you're going to get the wrong answer. Divided by 24. 1.5. Can I leave that decimal? Is that decimal okay? Yes. It terminates. 1.5 is totally fine. I'm not rounding it. That's the answer. But if you want to write it as a fraction, math enter is fine too. Either one. Okay? Either one. Then 22 minus 14. Hit enter. Divided by 24. Oop, can't have that. Math enter. And I get 1/3. There are my two solutions. Okay? So I have 5 and 17 done. Guys, don't just copy my answers, okay? You look up and look up and see if your step matches that step. And if it doesn't, you don't know why, let me come help you. But if you just copy the answers, you are going to not learn. Ooh, look, we even get a negative under a radical number. You can get imaginary numbers. So 2 more, and I'll come around and help you guys momentarily. What? That was number 3, yeah. Don't just copy steps, guys. Please try and do it yourself and then use my work to check. You're not going to learn if you copy. You're going to get this done in class. It's 2 problems. Don't